great. I'm delighted to have a smaller group because hopefully we can make this a little bit more of a conversation.
Sure.
And I've been working with Joanne, so thank you for coming as well. Um, and I can download what I know and then learn from you what your questions are and what you know. And hopefully we'll all come out more informed. And I'll have a better sense of what questions I know how to answer and which questions I don't, which is a really great way for me to practice ahead of the session. So thank you for allowing me to test myself that way as well. So what I'm going to do, I do have a PowerPoint, and it's kind of we are following a lot of bills. So for those of you who learn best by sort of reading, I'm going to share my screen just so you have an easier way of following along, but I will also circulate this afterwards. So no need to take copious notes if you find that distracting. I'm somebody who likes to take notes. It like ingrains things into my brain. So whatever works best for you. Since we're small, can we just go around and say like who we are, what our interest is in criminal justice, and if there are any specific bills or topics you really want to dig into during our time together today, that would be helpful. And Carol, can I pick on you first?
Sure.
Okay.
So I've been the chair of our league's Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Justice Committee. And while we've been focusing a lot of our attention on diversity, equity, and inclusion, we haven't been focusing as much on justice. And that's really the foundational piece to everything else. And so when I think of the justice system, and I think that's why so many groups have really turn their attention to a lack of systemic diversity in racial injustice. I think criminal justice and what happens to people in the justice system gets really skewed. So I just want to come and listen and look at who we can support to really speak for those who can't speak for themselves.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you. Well, I'm so glad you're here. And thank you for doing that leadership in your league. That's really important. So,
I'm not the only one, just so you know.
yeah, I know. Thank goodness for other people, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. All right. So, Joanne, do you want to go next?
Sure. As I mentioned when you were popped out of the room, Heather, I just joined the Spokane League this summer, and I have been interested in the criminal legal system for a number of years now. And indeed, Carol, I'm a data person. I'm a retired chemist. I worked at Gonzaga University, and so there's a lot of data out there that you can have access to, like in terms of convictions, in terms of people convicted. I'm specifically interested in convictions pertaining to sex offense related type convictions. And so you can I've done a public records request and looked at the people on the registry, and the disproportionate impact on people of color is just astounding. And so there's just so many things that I've learned that are really not working well in the criminal legal system and really need to be addressed in terms of things we've done in the past that really super impacted certain minorities that we really need to correct. And also just, we really need to think about what works and what doesn't work. And I really I like the league because it is data focused, and I'm data focused. And I think we've learned a lot over the last 30 years about what would be a better response for community safety. And we just need to move towards those. So thank you so much for letting me be here.
Yeah, totally. And Joanne, I don't have any of the sex offense specific bills on my slides. So I was hoping that you would be here and maybe be willing to share a little bit about what's coming down the pike as far as those bills. So if you're
Yeah,
if you're
there are
willing,
a couple that got dropped last spring that I'd like to mention if I have time.
Totally.
And then there's
Absolutely.
one that you and I both heard that is going to be dropped this this fall or this December, and I'd like to mention that one too.
Absolutely. Okay. All right. So LWB Thurston, I already messed up and like did not commit your name to memory. So say it for
That's
me again.
okay.
And
It's Darlene. I should change it again. I keep
I'm gonna
changing
try
it.
to
I don't
change
know.
it for you. Okay, Darlena, is it spelled D-A-R-L?
No, it's Darlene, Darlene.
Got it. Okay. All right. So tell us a little bit about yourself and what brought you to this group today.
I am the president of the League of Women Voters of Thurston County, and I have worked in social services for a really, really long time, and mostly around individuals who are homeless or have behavioral health, mental health, and substance use disorders. And I'm currently the chair of Capital Recovery Center, which is a mental health substance use organization, right? And we provide low barrier harm reduction based medication assisted treatment for people with opioid and fentanyl disorder.
Okay, this is amazing. I'm so excited to meet you. And I already feel like you are going to teach me a ton. So hopefully it's okay if I reach out to each of you afterwards with more questions, because
Of course.
this is
Of course.
Oh,
So I
that's
have
great.
a lot of interest. One is I really think the school to jail pipeline is a big problem and one that we need to really think about. I think there's an issue within the foster care group home for children that is also an issue, because I think too many of them end up on the sex offender list for things that they wouldn't if they were in a normal home.
Right.
And that they should be automatically reviewed at 18 if they did something at 13. And we need to look at that as a system problem, and it creates a problem when they come out of foster care for getting housing and jobs. And to get it off your record is not an easy system. It is not necessarily easy. And then the last one I want to talk about is really having substance use treatment in the jails. It's a problem. We've been trying to, and we have had limited success about getting buprenorphine and Visvitrol and some of the other medications for opioid disorders. And we know that as soon as they come out of jail, they're at high risk for overdose, because they haven't been properly medicated within jail.
Okay, great. Joanne, did you want to respond to anything that Darlene was sharing? How you start to?
Oh, I'll wait till later when she talks about the foster care thing.
Okay, cool. So I will, what I'd like to do is leave time for us to dig into those specific topics. And to be quite honest, I don't have any legislation on my radar as far as those three go. But all three issues are issues I'm interested in learning more about and have some like foundational knowledge in, I would say. I just haven't been following any legislative pathways. So we can definitely discuss them. And if there are bills that we need to be following or asking for, I would love to brainstorm that. I see we have a newcomer. Christy, I know you're off screen and you're on mute. If you want to unmute, and we're just introducing ourselves since we're a small group and just sharing like what interests you about criminal justice, and if there are any specific topics you'd like to dig into.
Hi, I'm sorry that I'm I'm in the middle of a walk. I did not get back to
Amazing.
my house
That's totally
in time.
allowed.
But what I wanted to say, and I don't even know what I look like right now, I think I released my video, is that I am dealing with some of these issues on a micro level, in that I've been involved with a program that helps people transition from incarceration and have been dealing with a former incarcerated guy. I knew him for about a year when he was in prison. And then so I'm dealing with the addiction issues, the housing issues, and all those things. And I just saw a conference from our group, and a lot of ex-inmates spoke and talked about, you know, some of the things that were on the legislative issue last year. And I just wanted to make sure they're still there. When I'm hearing things are dropping, my heart starts beating. And
Yeah.
one of those, the specific one is solitary confinement.
Yeah, okay,
So
great, we will talk about
that's
that.
the one I really want to hear about. And I really want to hear about more mental health care and drug addiction care within the prison. Because that, you know, right now, my buddy, he's on the streets because he just can't stay in recovery. And it's just there's a long story there, but I just feel like I'm dealing with these issues on a personal level, even though I know we're here to work on a macro level. I'd really like to hear what's on the legislative list so that we can really work to push those things forward. Thanks.
Okay, absolutely, amazing. You look fine, by the way. You look like you're having the walk that I hope to have later today. So good on you for doing it while the sun's out. I will say, Christy, that you are not alone in this group as far as having personal connections to the justice system and people you're personally invested in. And my hope is actually that as league members become more knowledgeable and engaged in this topic area, that we make it personal. And I think that's how all of our advocacy should be and how we can be most effective as advocates. So you are 100% welcome, and thank you for the work that you're doing with that gentleman. And I don't, at the risk of asking you to come off mute one more time, I'm hoping you can share the name of that organization that you're a part of. Oh, did she leave the room?
Yeah, no, I can
Oh,
come
you're
off
here.
mute.
Okay,
Yeah,
cool,
yeah.
cool, cool.
So it's Underground Ministries.
Got it. Okay, awesome. Great to have another connection. Okay, I see Teresa and Aruna. Teresa and Aruna, what we're doing is just, we're coming off mute and just, since we're a smaller group, sharing what brought us to this particular breakout today. And if you have any specific items of legislation or issues you'd like to discuss related to criminal justice, what those are. So Teresa, can I ask you to share?
You can. I'm wondering though, who's on iPhone?
That's Christy. She just shared.
Okay, so I mean the other box that says iPhone, that's Chrissy too?
Yeah, I think that's Christy.
Okay, if not, I could rename the person as I was going to
No,
say.
it's not me. I don't have an iPhone.
I think
I
that's
have-
somebody else. So I'm wondering if they tell me their name, I can change their name since I'm a co-host. Or sometimes when people are on phones, they can't talk either. So just
Yeah,
know
I
that
know.
if you would like that, put your go off mute and let me know. So
I
meanwhile,
think they have to push *6 or something to be able to speak, you know,
Yeah.
if they are connecting
There
by
you go.
phone.
Looked like good advice. Okay, iPhone, you actually did come off mute for a minute. So if you push that *6 again, it might happen. All right, I'll leave it alone, but if you come off mute, I will change your name.
Thanks, Teresa. I know you're wearing a couple different hats right now.
So the hat I'm wearing in this meeting is I have been a director of a very tiny nonprofit here in Tacoma that is working with women coming out of incarceration and reentry in general with the population of Pierce County. We have 2 very small shelters that are for women when they're reentering. And I've also, over the last decade, done more and more with homelessness because of the very undeniable connection between those 2 things. So the issues that are most on my mind right now are around how we are set up so much to keep that homelessness incarceration cycle going and how to break that. And we have plenty of ideas and not a lot of funding. The other thing is that while people are incarcerated, there is such an incredible difference between the experience of people with funding and people without. So some of the things about the way the commissary system is run, I think the state should step in and change that. I think it's criminal what's happening where people have totally different experiences depending on how much money their family has. The other issue that is big on my radar is the early release time for jails throughout the state. That needs to change, and I haven't seen legislation that tries to deal with that, but I don't know why we could not do that at the state level. I mean, I know why it's going to be hard, but I don't know why we aren't stepping up and doing it, because that's also just causing horrible problems.
So just to clarify, when you say early release time for jail throughout the state, you're talking about county jail facilities as opposed to early release from prison?
Absolutely. So
Got
thank you for clarifying. I'm saying people are being let out of jail at midnight, 5 a.m. times
Early in the
winter,
day, yes.
in the, you know, no matter what, there are no buses running and they're just being dumped on the street. And then it's like, oh, surprise, people
Yeah.
break into a space to get warm or something.
Got it. Okay.
Oh, thank you for saying that, because early releases are in general a good thing, but not from jail in the dead of winter.
So that's a really helpful clarification. Okay, Aruna, do you want to share next? Oh, hang on, you're on mute. You're on mute.
iPhone person is trying to talk, probably.
Oh, iPhone person.
This is Cassie Undlin. Did you hear me?
We can hear you.
Yes, we can.
Okay. I didn't know how to get off of mute. I signed up because my daughter is a drug addict, has gone through the not prison system, but the jail system. She currently is, after quite a few years of work, she just finished her 11th year sober and has graduated from law school out of Syracuse. So, I mean,
Wow.
it's a really good story. And, you know, I would like to see other people have really good stories. And so that's why I'm here.
Well, thank you for being here. Thank you for persevering and coming off mute, and also for sharing that story as somebody who's been directly impacted by, you know, that the drug use sort of scourge on the country right now. And what a wonderful thing for your daughter to have such a supported and invested parent. That's really cool. Okay, Aruna.
Good to see you, everybody. Thank you. I feel I've worked in social justice field in social work with foster care system for a number of years, and in individuals with developmental disabilities. So close to my heart is, you know, kind of working with people who need the help most, and like drug courts and mental health courts. I was in a previous session in the behavioral health, you know, group, and you know, also to the, you know, supports, but also workforce enhancement part, because, you know, legislators are approving the funds, but we don't have the workforce. So that's the other thing. But so the outcome of the foster care kids, and especially when the wrongdoing has happened before the age of 21, but, you know, where we don't have the frontal lobe development fully, and, you know, then they kind of get long sentences and no outcome. I'm interested in traffic stops by police, and I am also very much interested in re-entry planning before, you know, they are released from the prison or jail, because I think planning for that is really, really important, and recidivism rates are much lower if we can, you know, have the re-entry planning. And few other things, and few other things. And I wanted to say, Christy, your story, you know, when you have direct interactions, you know, with the people who are impacted by these things, your stories to the legislature will make a lot of impact as far as what needs to happen.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Was somebody else going to say something?
Yes, this is Cassie. I was going to say my daughter went through the Tacoma drug court. So, and that's part of her positive resolution.
Hey, that's great.
That's
That's
cool.
what all the counties need to have, you know, and prosecutor's office being open to it and public defenders working on that piece, that makes a world of difference.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that we're, I'll just kind of go off on a side note real quick on drug court is, you know, one of the things that we're hearing from Ann Davison here in Seattle, who files misdemeanor charges as our city attorney, is that we, you know, there are some instances where she encourages felony charges to be brought because those are the people who then qualify for the most effective services, and it creates this kind of perverse incentive to overcharge people just so they can access the most things we know are most effective in solving their particular challenges. And so that's something that the league is really cognizant of, that, you know, where support and criminal justice do intersect, we don't want the criminal justice system to sort of dictate a particular punitive pathway in order for people to be eligible for those supports, because that is a little backwards. So that just occurred to me because I just saw her speak about that a couple months ago at a crime prevention conference, and I was like, oh, okay, note to self. Okay, I realize I've been sharing my PowerPoint screen this whole time. I'm so sorry. I meant to take the share off so we could see each other while we were introducing each other. But oh well, I'm sure I can ask for your forgiveness. So I'm going to start this PowerPoint, and when we get to topics that you have mentioned, I'll try to go into a little more detail to the extent I know anything, but I'll also just invite discussion from the folks who raise the topics, because y'all seem like you are in the field doing the work or have an abundance of expertise to share. And just keep in mind, what we're really hoping to dig into today is opportunities for problem solving at the legislative level. So there's, you know, an abundance of sort of accountability and transparency issues that are ongoing, for which there's not necessarily a legislative pathway, but we're hoping, you know, from this group, it would be really helpful for us to hear as like league leaders where we can direct our time and energy to legislative advocacy. So I'm going to kind of go through these first few slides kind of quickly, but just for those of you who are relatively new to the league, we're a nonpartisan organization, and that doesn't mean that we don't take stances on issues, quite the contrary, obviously, but because in people's minds, there are issues that are, you know, progressive versus conservative, it can become confusing when we say that we're nonpartisan. So what we mean by that is that we don't support political parties or candidates. And that's just sort of a vocabulary point of order. For our legislative advocacy, when we're taking stances on issues or bills, our policy is that those stances must be supported by a league public policy position. And the reason that's important to us as an organization is all of our league positions have been developed with input from our membership at large. And so when we advocate for something, we really want to be able to point to a public policy position that our members have lifted up, so that we know that we're speaking, you know, in good faith on behalf of the organization. But that doesn't mean we can't be flexible as far as applying our league positions. We do try to word them in a way that's broad enough that they might be applied to multiple different pieces of legislation. So I can show you here an example. We're sort of late to the criminal justice arena, I would say, as an organization. We've been around for 100 years, and you know, we've done a lot of good around civil rights and access to the vote, but the issue of criminal justice in particular, we are a little late to the party. So it was just in 2021 that we, as a state league, adopted the California position on criminal justice, because they were a little ahead of the game. And And then that position was adopted by National League, which is really exciting because it means it can be relied upon by any league in the country at this point. So the wording of the criminal justice position, there are several sort of sub points, but it's that a criminal justice, we support a criminal justice system that is just, effective, equitable, transparent, and fosters public trust at all stages. So that's an example of broad wording that really allows us to be flexible in how we advocate. And of course, we advocate, as Joanne pointed out, we advocate based on sort of best practices and evidence-based policy. So particularly in the criminal justice sphere, I think that it's really important to be able to cite studies and research rather than just relying on sort of buzzwords and anecdotes. And those have their place, certainly. I mean, you know, the point was made that it's really effective to bring that personal narrative to our lawmakers so that they understand sort of the human connection that's, you know, alongside and supplemental to the evidence and data. But at the same time, you know, this is a really heated and emotional area of law, and it can become very polarized very quickly. And certainly that's sort of the landscape right now. So, you know, it's really important. And I think our lawmakers are very cognizant of the fact that when you're advocating for something, you need to be able to cite your sources. Okay, we also have public policy positions across a bunch of other issues, and they need to be updated. So if you have an interest in supporting our work, I'll provide all of our contact information at the end, and you can get in touch so we can update our public policy positions on those areas. I keep saying we, by the way, because our team that's been really active over the interim, Aruna and Joanne are part of it, consists of some truly powerhouse advocates, community folks with a wide variety of backgrounds, formerly incarcerated individuals and their loved ones. So I happen to be the issue chair for our team, which means I do the speaking on behalf of the league, but I do it because of all of their work, and I'm constantly learning from them. So that's the we behind the me. So the way that, you know, we have a lot of bills that we cover. It's been a particularly active area of law over the last several years, ever since the George Floyd uprising. And so the way that I encourage people to kind of organize their thinking around all of this legislation is along sort of the course of the chronological timeline of a criminal case. So we have bills that address sort of the pre-trial stage of proceedings, like policing, detentions, et cetera. Then we've got trial, so access to counsel, and sentencing, you know, how prison terms are calculated. Then we've got prisons themselves, and, you know, the inhumane conditions that need to be remedied. We've got reentry, which y'all seem very knowledgeable about already. So folks coming back into the community, and how do we want to support them to set them up for success. And then juvenile justice, you know, obviously those cases go through all these stages as well, but because, as Aruna pointed out, those particular folks are at a different stage of brain development. We've been doing a lot of advocacy around thinking about their cases differently and what justice really means for them. So I'm really excited about the work that we've done, particularly in the last couple of years and in this legislative interim, reaching out to different stakeholders in the criminal justice movement. I think that we hadn't had the bandwidth to do this kind of outreach in the way that we really wanted to before now, but our group has grown and our relationships have become stronger with different stakeholders. And so we've been able to bring a lot of new voices forward and learn a lot from different folks. So we've connected with families who've lost loved ones to police violence, either people who have been killed in vehicle pursuits or in other uses of deadly force by police, victims and survivors of crime. And our interest there is really breaking down the binary between victims and offenders, since we know that people who commit crimes or who are accused of crimes often have also survived abuse or been victimized themselves. And so thinking about that as kind of a continuum rather than two buckets, and encouraging lawmakers to think about that as well. Incarcerated individuals, we have been communicating regularly with folks under the jurisdiction of the Washington Department of Corrections, and they have been instrumental in helping us think about our legislative priorities and next steps. We've got researchers and policymakers, of course. They're kind of they've always been a big part of the League's work across issues. And then, of course, legislators. And I put taxpayers on here because, a lot of you touched on the need for substance use treatment and mental health treatment in different carceral settings, and how those are kind of chronically underfunded. And I think that it's really important for us as taxpayers to remember that we are paying for these services and that we are entitled to transparency and accountability in how those funds are spent. And I'm going to get into that a little bit more around some of the DOC accountability that we've been pursuing. Any questions so far? No. Just interrupt me or raise a hand like at any point. Yeah, Aruna?
Yeah, you mentioned about researchers. So which research organizations are you connected with?
Yeah, I mean, it really runs the gamut, and it's really bill by bill. So, we have a lot of research coming through the ACLU as far as like the police accountability piece. We are doing public records requests on vehicle pursuits across the state and working with former professors and data specialists to review and analyze that. We are working with, we're doing also data requests from the DOC to get a better sense of how they're spending their money, and working with legislators who have access to, auditor functions. We're asking them for like early bill reports and things like that. So it really varies, but yeah, I can get you a more specific list, and maybe you can help us add to it.
Thank you.
Yeah. So these are our legislative priorities for 2024. We are primarily following the lead of organizations that are serving or led by folks who are directly impacted by the justice system. And so for us, that means the Washington Coalition for Police Accountability for the most part, and also on 1324, the fourth bill listed here, incarcerated folks who are really asking for an expansion of that bill. So I'm going to get into all of these in more detail, but again, just in terms of organizing your thinking, sort of thinking through like, okay, which of these are sort of the pre-filing police misconduct pieces versus the litigation phase versus, the post-conviction and prison reform sort of bucket. So we're trying to cover all of those areas. So, okay, 1513, traffic safety. So this is one of several bills that would restrict the way that police engage with the public in a way that we think promotes public safety. And so, and also creates more efficiency in law enforcement where we know that there's a labor shortage, which is true of like all industries, but particularly in law enforcement right now. So this would restrict when an officer can pull somebody over. And basically they would be limited to pulling folks over for the things we know are most likely to cause traffic accidents, like DUIs and reckless driving, those kinds of unsafe, like patently unsafe and imminently dangerous driving behaviors, and certainly like speeding and that sort of thing. And the reason for this law is because traffic stops are kind of unusual in terms of policing, because you have an officer going into a situation, that's roadside, so you're dealing with traffic. You're coming up behind a driver, you have no idea, you don't know who they are or what they're doing or what's in their vehicle. And it sort of lends itself to hasty decision-making and quick escalation in a way that is particularly shown to lead to devastating outcomes for Black and brown folks. So not only are they more likely to be pulled over at disproportionate rates, but also the ways that those interactions can escalate has been shown to be racially disproportionate as well. So what we're hoping to do is by asking law enforcement officers to limit traffic stops to those offenses that are most likely to endanger people, we're gonna have fewer pretextual stops and less a sort of fishing expeditions, if you will. And this also would create a community fund for drivers who can't afford to fix their vehicles for broken taillight or something of that nature. They would get a voucher to be able to pay for that, because we know they can't pay for a ticket. If they can't fix their vehicle, they won't be able to pay for a ticket, right? So it just sort of traps people in this cycle of criminal justice and poverty that somebody else mentioned when it comes to housing. And so this got stuck in House rules last year. We have made a lot of headway, I think, in convincing lawmakers that this is really an important way for us to keep motorists, pedestrians, officers safe. And we'll be advocating for it again. So that's traffic safety. Okay. Civil rights. So this bill, House Bill 1445, also got stuck in rules last year, and it would basically create accountability mechanism through the Attorney General's office for instances where there's patterns and practices of misconduct in a law enforcement agency. So I'm emphasizing it's a civil litigation pathway, and it's to create accountability at an agency level where there's like demonstrated instances of misconduct. The reason for why this is really necessary is that currently, if you want civil accountability for an entire agency, you have to go to the Department of Justice and file a 1983 civil rights action, and it is incredibly slow. There's a significant backlog of cases, and as you're waiting for your case to move forward, those law enforcement agencies, unless there's an injunction or something, are still on the road, are still, they're not incentivized to change. So this is really creating a more efficient state level accountability mechanism. And this also got stuck in rules. So Rep. Hansen, who's now Senator Hansen, he was the sponsor of this. And I think it's Farvar who's taking it up now. Yes, okay, cool. That actually finally penetrated and I retained it. So we will see where that goes, but there was pretty good support for this. Senator Hansen got COVID at like a critical juncture last session. It just sort of fell off, unfortunately, but there was pretty broad-based support for it. And the AG's office is on board. Contrast 1445 with 1579, which also creates a new function in the Attorney General's office. They're not as excited about owning this, but we're really trying to bring them along because it's really important. So a couple years ago, we created, lawmakers created and funded the Office of Independent Investigation to go out when there are instances of suspected criminal use of deadly force by police officers and be at the scene and investigate those cases and make sure that the officers themselves and prosecuting agencies in that same jurisdiction aren't the ones owning that investigation, because those relationships can be very close, and it's really important to have arm's length from the colleagues that you're investigating in order to have an outcome that the trust can really rely on, that the public can really rely on. So having those internal investigations, not internal, but live with the AG's office, is a way of really restoring public trust in these officer misconduct situations. And this would be a criminal litigation pathway, prosecution pathway against specific officers. So basically, we have this investigation office fully funded, and we now need to fund the office that would take those investigations over and prosecute them. Runa.
It seems the first three bills that you talked about, all of them were stuck in the Rules Committee.
Yeah.
So is there something underlying barrier to moving it forward so that it can come to the House or Senate floor for the vote?
Yeah. So last session, there were a couple specific issues that kind of sucked all the air out of the room and really just left lawmakers without a lot of capacity to move these particular bills forward. So we had the Blake fix, where they had to figure out how we were or were not going to criminalize drug possession as a state, because they were on deadline that the courts had kind of given them for passing that law. And so basically, there are things that the legislature is on deadline for, and then there's everything else. And it can't all be equally urgent, even though we stress it really is, because we consider many of these life-saving bills. But this session, I don't know if you were there for the introduction piece. Nancy Sapiro was speaking about the initiatives to the legislature. Those are going to be the things that suck the air out of the room this session. So if those initiatives get enough signatures where they are able to be presented to the legislature, there's 6 different issues that the legislature is going to have to address, and one way or another. And so we're really hoping, in particular with vehicle pursuits, because that's the initiative that touches our issue, that they don't get the signatures, because it's going to make it really challenging for us to get some of these other bills moved forward. So it's just, and it's a short session, right? So sentencing reform, where am I on time? Oh my God, like almost barely done. I don't know how the secretary just got to chatting really early. Sorry, I didn't pace myself very well. But I do want to talk about sentencing reform, because I know there's a couple folks here who specifically mentioned that. So 1324 passed last session, basically would allow incarcerated folks whose juvenile points are counting against them at sentencing. It would restrict the court's ability to use juvenile points to lengthen their sentences as adults. And sorry, I said that in a really clunky way, because what we're trying to do this session is get that relief that currently is only affecting cases going forward, get that relief applied to folks who are serving sentences right now where juvenile points were factored into their sentence. So basically, there's a bunch of adults sitting in prison because at the time they were sentenced as adults, courts looked at their juvenile criminal history and added those points to their adult sentence. And because of what Aruna touched on as far as brain development in folks up to the age of 25, actually, we know that you know, we didn't have a full understanding of how the juvenile brain worked at the time that many of these people were sentenced. And so it's appropriate in our view for those folks to come before the sentencing body again and be and have their sentence reconsidered in light of the new science. So similarly, House Bill 1325 would allow people who were incarcerated before the age of 25 to seek review for release based on the same rationale. And there's a third sentencing reform effort where we would eliminate mandatory stacking of enhancements to allow folks to get out sooner. Right now, you know, if you fire a bullet into a crowd, depending on how many, you know, say there were 4 people in the crowd, each of those people could be like a firearms enhancement, separate firearms enhancement that brings with it an additional 5-year sentence. And so the courts right now have to impose those sentences, those enhancements consecutively. So it's like 5, 10, 15, 20, and those add up really quickly. And so this would allow courts the discretion to impose those enhancements concurrently, so that it's like a limited 5-year term across all of the enhancements rather than adding them together. I'm going to pause right now because I just, again, totally paced this poorly. And I want folks to have a chance to dig into what they were specifically talking about. So if there is legislation related to substance abuse treatment or mental health treatment in carceral settings that you want to flag for us, or any other bills that I didn't go through already that you feel like we need to talk about. I'm on the slide right now for solitary confinement. Suffice it to say, we're super supportive. We are trying to dig into the fiscal note on that bill because DOC is saying that it's going to cost more money to keep people out of solitary confinement. And they're saying that with respect to another prison bill, 1798. And they're not being transparent at all with those numbers. So really trying to hold their feet to the fire. Anybody want to pipe up on any other bills that they know of that aren't on this list? Or Joanne, do you want to talk about yours for a minute? No, okay.
I'd be happy to talk about mine, but it's not on the list because it hasn't been dropped yet.
That's
So-
okay. I mean, none of these have officially, you know, well, I guess they're going to be reintroduced, but go ahead. Yeah, I'd like to give you the floor.
So just a real quick, bring you up to speed. So in the state of Washington, we have what's called a sex offense policy board, and it's composed of 13 individuals appointed by the state. They're all stakeholders. They're prosecuting attorneys, law enforcement, treatment providers, victim advocates, people from civil commitment, the whole suite of all the things that people with a sex offense have. And 2 years ago, the legislature asked the board to do some research on what are the current best practices with dealing with this population of people. And they came forth with multiple recommendations, but the one that we have been told will be sponsored, a bill will be sponsored this coming session, has to do with creating a pathway off of lifetime supervision. So people in the state of Washington who are convicted of a Class A sex offense, no matter their age, will be sentenced to lifetime supervision for, they think there's like 6 different types of Class A offenses. And what we've learned is that it's really ineffective, that people only need to be supervised as they transition into the community. what the research has shown and what DOC has discovered is that continued supervising of people who are doing well in the community is problematic. And currently, there's absolutely no way off for these people off of supervision. They can't petition a judge, they can't go to a prosecutor, there's not a path off. So the board recommended, for lots of reasons, that the state should create a path off for individuals who are doing well, who have proven that they are capable of living safely in the community, and they would have to do these certain things, but then they would actually be able to get off of supervision at some point in their life. So that's a bill that has to do with reentry. One of the harshest things about having lifetime supervision is the loss of hope for many of these individuals. And when people, like the people from DOC always say, you know, hopeless people, I mean, people who have no hope, they're the ones that we have, I mean, that if they have nothing to live for, if they have no hope, then that can be a really terrible place. So anyway, if it does come out, I hope that the league will support it in some way. And then just quickly, just real briefly, I think Aruna was in the behavioral health subcommittee earlier, and I was intrigued to hear how she said that they were trying to create 2 new residences for people with mental health problems, and there was all this pushback from people in the neighborhood. So there are some people who are convicted of a sex offense that the state decides needs additional treatment after they get released from prison, and they send them to a institution on McNeil Island, and the Supreme Court has declared that McNeil Island is constitutional as long as it's really doing what it's supposed to be doing, which is providing additional treatment and then allowing people to get off the island. And so people have been getting off the island for decades, but because of the lack of places for these people to go, many of these people have significant cognitive impairments and aren't capable of living alone. They need to live in a group home. Because the state instituted a new law 2 years ago saying these group homes have to be distributed across the state, based on how many people, say, from Snohomish County went to the Civil Commitment Center. Well, they should have at least that many places for people to live in Snohomish County. So, and when people discovered that some of these sites were getting put in their counties, like Thurston County, wow, lots of craziness happened. And so there's 2 bills that currently got dropped last February that are going to try to restrict where these homes can go. And just like we don't want to restrict homes for anybody with mental health issues, we don't want to restrict homes for these people either. So those are some that I want to fight against. And just real quickly, I wanted to add to Darlene about the foster care thing. I hope you heard about 1394. So 1394 was a bill that I worked on last year, and we're so grateful it got passed. It is an age-appropriate response for young people who are adjudicated for a sex offense. And good news is that henceforth, anybody who was put on the sex offense registry for some behavior that they did as a juvenile, after they've been on it for 3 years, offense-free, they get automatically removed. They're going to be removed. We're expecting at least 3,000 people this December to get letters from the state saying, because of this new law, they no longer have to register as a sex offender, which will open up lots of housing, lots of jobs, lots of things like that. So, and also, Darlene, going forward, only certain individuals who are juveniles, small number, like just a couple percent, will even have to register going forward. So we're really happy about that too.
Oh, that's wonderful news. I didn't know that. So I will pass this on to some people I know.
Yeah, it's Bill 1394.
Okay.
Yeah, I can drop a link to that in the chat also. Amazing. Thank you.
Yay.
Diana. Appreciate you. Okay, so I'm just gonna skip to what we could use help with, if that's okay. Turns out we could use help. Here's 1394. There's the bill summary. Okay, so as I was saying a moment ago, we're sort of on the defense in regards to a couple of things. The vehicle pursuit piece is really important. So let me bring up my slide here. Okay, so oops, can y'all see that? I don't know why there we go. It's not sharing. It's just being kind of particular. There you go. Okay, so vehicle pursuits. So we fought hard to pass this law that would basically raise the standard of proof that an officer needed in order to pursue people, and for most types of crimes. And law enforcement does not like being managed by the legislature. I'm just going to say that. I think that's a fair summary of their position across a lot of issues. And so last session, unfortunately, they were successful in getting the standard lowered again to reasonable suspicion to be able to pursue people for stolen vehicles and so forth. Even though we know that the spike in vehicle theft happened across the country, and in states where they had not imposed these restrictions on pursuits. So Washington was not unique, but they, made the argument that the spike was caused by the vehicle rollback pursuit bill, and successfully fought for that rollback and are trying to further roll back that bill this year. We are working with families who, like I said, have had loved ones killed in vehicle pursuits, innocent bystanders, etc. Just last week, there was a pregnant woman struck in Tacoma because police were chasing somebody they suspected of rape and kidnapping. It turned out they had the wrong person. So these are high-speed chases through populated areas. They are dangerous, and our argument is just for a more conservative weighing of the costs and benefits. So we are asking people to decline to sign the initiative that would result in the further rollback. If you can spread the word about this, I would be so grateful. Just give people the heads up that, the misinformation campaign that's out there, which is that progressive just want to tie the hands of police officers. It's really not true. It's not that we don't want people held accountable. We just don't want people held accountable at the cost of lives of innocent bystanders, but also police officers and other motorists. So law enforcement does have other tools that they can use, spike strips, going to the house where a vehicle is registered to after the vehicle is, back home, and monitoring the house where they're apprehending people off of the roads or in safer ways. So that's what we're asking for. House Bill 1445, like I said, I'm going to put the link in the chat. This is the civil pathway to accountability for agencies engaged in patterns and practices of misconduct. The ask here is for lawmakers in the House to take early action. And ACLU has created a petition that they will be submitting, I think, on the 13th, that I currently have a sign-in request on for the league to sign in organizationally in support. I will put the link in the chat for people to sign the petition as individuals. And it's basically, again, trying to get this out of rules real quick early in the session. We would love to have people sign up for our legislative newsletter. Let me put that link in the chat as well. This is a way for you to stay informed of our action alerts on the bills that I've been talking about, and also be invited to meetings with legislators etc., during the session, but also afterwards. So we would love to have you subscribe. And then there are a couple meetings coming up. So folks in Spokane, you may have already heard about this, but there is an opportunity for public input on the dashboard, public safety law enforcement data collection dashboard that WSU is in the process of creating, and there's an in-person opportunity to give input on December 5th at the WSU County Extension Office. The 2 times are posted there. If you want more information, feel free to email me. And then I'm going out of order here, but the House Community Safety, Justice, and Reentry committee is also meeting December 5th virtually. I encourage people to go because Roger Goodman is going to be providing an overview of what's truly behind the headlines on crime trends. So is it really that bad? Are we just returning to pre-pandemic levels? Or do we all need to be terrified that we're gonna be, victimized at every turn? That's it. I'm so sorry for the rush at the end here, but please get in touch with me if you'd like to join our group. We would love to have you. All right, enjoy the rest.